I'm Ryan O'Doud, and you're listening to Ryan's Audiobooks on the Issues Magazine YouTube channel. Today we're continuing with section 1022, In Adam from the Son of Knowledge, by Lex Hixon Nur Al Jerrahi. We're picking up in the middle of chapter 14, New Light on Sufi Science. The figures in this glorious prophetic lineage who stand out with greatest clarity for Sufism are Jesus and Muhammad. May divine peace always embrace them. The beloved Jesus and the beloved Muhammad are manifestations of divine awareness. They are beings avid only for God. They incarnate divine love and divine wisdom. They demonstrate and continue to transmit disinterested love for truth. Maintaining great reverence for their noble prophetic precursors in all the epochs of human history, Sufi science, avoiding dogmatic definitions, concentrates in the blessed contemplation of these two sublime beings of love and wisdom, each with his own spiritual mood and tone, separated in mundane time by a brief period of 5 centuries. Jesus and Muhammad mark a new step in human history, the birth of our spiritual era. They miraculously inaugurate the final days of completion, which will have an indefinite duration, a future of a split second or millions of years, comparable to the geological history of the earth. Only God knows. These final days of rapture and plenitude that now surround us are an immense rhapsody, a passionate lyrical sigh, a profusion of scintillating revelations. This is a perception of theophonic transparency, much more profound than the viewpoint of any empirical historian. From its first witnesses in prehistory to its realization in the secret profundities of the vast planetary communities of Jesus and Muhammad, this maturation of the human spirit has been channeled in every cultural ambiance through Sufis, who have always stimulated rich reciprocal influence among historical religions. To return up the current of being, singing lyrical songs of love, has been Sufism, is Sufism, and will be Sufism, the spontaneous movement that existed in the great classical civilizations of the globe and continues to exist in the modern world, where a new generation of Sufis is emerging, singing their hymns of infinite joy and audacious aspiration for all humanity. Sufism is the serious invitation from truth for us to take responsibility with entire good faith for working out the well-being of humankind and the planet. The life of the Sufi, in whatever context, is validated by the experience of total affection for humanity, total consecration to all creation, and conscious unity with the living one. Humanity left to itself, its life drained of spiritual significance, follows the false doctrine of the survival of the fittest, represses its painful sense of exile, and enters gradually and unconsciously into darkness. Lacking a true center of gravity, human beings then experience upon this earth the eruption of the inferno with consequent moral devastation. Sufism is the alternative current in history, even the secret essence of history. Sufi science, which is disconcerting to those who are attached to rational dialectic, is an unveiling of divine grace, which exists everywhere, always, in all hearts. This subtle science, which refuses to incarcerate the Holy Spirit in formulas, calls humanity to enter consciously the field of universal brotherhood and sisterhood, and to look upon physical nature as an open book of spiritual symbols. Sufism plants its inspiring message in hearts full of nostalgia for revelation, for a true paradigm, for a spiritual language that could replace the analytic, technical, didactic, and manipulative language of the world. The living words of a Sufi master who is devoted passionately to the service of divine beauty, must be of an order distinct from all theology and philosophy, must be the opposite pole of all ideology. Sufism generates not ideas, but luminous waves in the ocean of human consciousness, waves that are regulated by a secret rhythm. Sufism is the interior regenerative force that succeeds in elevating the entire human enterprise, inspiring authentic efforts at purification and persevering meditation. Sufi science is not a magical activity. Magic is always the quest for power, the cult of power, the drug of power, whether expressed through ancient atavistic rites or through modern technology. The stealing of fire, the Promethean rebellion, is equally the drama of contemporary society. As illuminating as the sacred history of our lost Eden, this theft of raw power by the ego represents any action that tends to destroy our direct sense of the unity of consciousness. It is not simply a childish myth. It is the one sacrilege possible, to negate unity. Sufism is extremely sensitive to the danger of such negation, which may come from any direction. Sufi science is simply the affirmation of divine sufficiency, the indivisible plenitude of the One. This science, free from anxious grasping for personal or collective power, does not operate like a therapeutic doctrine or a religious strategy for redemption, but affects a fundamental fusion with divine life. Sufism does not interpose intermediaries. It is a direct vision. In its intuitive totality, nothing is suppressed and nothing is abstracted. It is not an ideal outside ourselves, nor even an organ of our perception. Sufism is simply to experience the perfect forgetfulness of ourselves. It's a visionary activity that spontaneously intuits the secret relations among numbers, letters, dreams, stars, and daily events. It provides telepathic communication with living beings and those who are called dead. It offers the gift of premonition and the gift of deciphering the universe as a play of signs and omens. Sufi science is clear, naked vision, before which is displayed the mystical itinerary of the soul, stage by stage, each marked by precise degrees of love and wisdom. The panoramic vision of Sufism unifies epochs and cultures into an essential expanse that embraces human life in its totality, in its transparency to the One. Our ordinary concepts of space and time must undergo radical transmutation by Sufi science. All conscious beings witness and testify to this englobing presence of pure life, sometimes called divine presence. The beyond manifests as the near. There is no other being than being. The actions and words that affirm the living one surge naturally from the heart of Sufism like flower from stem, engendering in the practitioners a disposition of mind capable of transcending accepted and codified conventions, capable of transcending mere articles of faith, labels, and titles. Instead of being a system of intellectual coordinates, Sufi science displays its principles through dance and pantomime, through playful and profound gestures of the Sufi master and his or her community. Sufism is the organic rite of steps and breaths that mysteriously actualizes the principles of spiritual science in the human body, the rite of the mystic circle that celebrates here and now the new cycle of wisdom, the new light. Sufi science always teaches the accompaniment of prayer and contemplation with beautiful and subtle movements of the body. It's not a medium of knowledge, but a medium of metamorphosis. Far from being rarefied and abstract, Sufism displays itself not as a rational scheme, but as the concrete dance of all existence immersed in God, irradiated by the One. From childhood, veneration is natural to human beings. In Sufism, this primordial urge to venerate, which is intrinsic to the soul and is perpetually being displayed in various forms, finally expresses and incarnates fully not within a mythological paradise or inside a cloistered convent, but across the face of the whole earth. The kingdoms and governments of this world exist in a permanent crisis of spiritual meaning. The contemporary myth of modernity and its supposed sufficiency is beginning to lose vitality. Sufism is a ray of divine light, ungraspable in itself, that transmutes whatever it touches, submitting to examination the pretensions of every society, the presuppositions of every science, all of which are incapable of fully embracing reality. Political ideology and religious dogmatism generate the worst confusion in this universal crisis of spiritual significance. Sufism is the password that opens the gates of authentic knowing. It is not one more system of signs or conventional beliefs that we can accept or reject. Without this living keyword of unity, the divine word, civilization, in its interior depths lacks true foundation. Sufism is the alliance or covenant between God and the human heart, which is always in search of sure guidance. Sufism is the promise and actualization of our interior perfection. The community that succeeds in keeping its spiritual knowledge intact, not simply as an ancient religion or a cultural tradition, but as an indivisible totality of being, and as a perpetual thirst for this totality. Such a community expresses a total way of life, its collective psyche dwelling in a blessed state of receptivity to the One. The spiritual enterprise of such a community, gifted with archetypical values and speaking an idiom of initiates, penetrates the various strata of consciousness and arrives at essence. This triumph of faithfulness to true human nature inaugurates an epoch of splendor, whether it is simply in the breast of a Sufi master, in the protected precincts of a mystical fraternity, or openly as a planetary civilization. Sufi science effects a mediation between any particular society and the deep ethical and spiritual postulates that ground that society. Sufism heals the collective deafness to the prophetic call by generating personal vigilance, which is irreplaceable and cannot be substituted for by anything. The vigilance of each human being who desires to live in communion with the One. A process of call and response always exists between Sufism and society. There is an inseparable correlation between the mystic path and the life of the people. Sufi science is the universal tradition, nuanced by lights of Judaism, Christianity, Islam, Hinduism, Buddhism, and indigenous traditions. The universal tradition where pilgrims on their long journey encounter food and shelter, spaces to pray and meditate. It is a caravansary of tenderness and guidance. Sufi science opens a harmonious zone in our being. This science generates a state of profound release that is not hypnosis but alert introspection, free from the resistance of what is inert in psyche and culture, free from the subtle forms of narrow self-satisfaction. This science investigates the innate experience of universal harmony, perceived according to the personal sensibility and particular genius of each individual, as a ray from the One. In the heart of every creature, which with its unrepeatable and unique character. In the nucleus of each expression of the living One reigns the same going beyond, the same longing for mystic union or contemplation. Completion. Sufism presents the potential open to all human beings, whatever their temperament or turn of mind, the possibility of tasting and enjoying union and supreme identity. Sufism is the impulse toward the essential, toward the secret point of intersection with oneness, where the human being refuses to be a mere cipher or concept and recovers its original nature as the living one. This is the delightful liberty of pure being, the rapture that accompanies the Sufi pilgrim wherever his or her route may lead. It is not by chance that Sufi masters speak of liberating the human soul. This regenerative transmuting operation of Sufi science, through nonverbal forms of communication, reveals souls as amphibious organisms free to swim or dance with their holy compatriots, at once in temporality and in eternity, basing themselves solely in God. These teachings These exceptional gifts that transform devotees who gather around Sufi masters do not contain any technical or mechanical manipulations, neither of mind nor of body, nor can these teachings be reduced to any planned series of spiritual exercises. On the contrary, the authentic transmission of the living principles of this science is rooted in the evocative and lyrical capacity of the Sufi master and in the capacity of disciples to tolerate ambiguity of meaning, intuitively understanding various subtle allusions that evoke a rich plurality of hidden teachings. The disciples must be able to sense their unique affinity with the soul, mind, and body of their beloved guide and the entire spiritual community, including mystic saints of the past and the common basis of their different personalities and their different epochs. Sufism is not something exterior, but a singular gaze that is shared by master and disciple in the transparency of the One. Sufism is a radical shock that produces the interior manifestation of the long-desired and astonishing day of days, opening the doors of ecstatic abandon to perpetual communion with the primordial purity of the One. We are drawn forth from the sinuous corridors of the limited self, from the nightmare of moribund society, to tear away all masks. The theatrical representations of our personal and collective history is an operation capable of fundamentally changing the world. The plethora of deceptive forms will dissipate like clouds. The prisons of our conditioned concepts will break open like seed pods. The white conch shell of Sufism resounds with the oceanic music of the One, where divisive time and space cease to function, ceding to original unity. Sufi science renders navigable the oneness without characteristics, paths, or surface. This noble and sublime science, which nourishes humanity only with the bread of truth, is based on direct apprehension of the sacred procession of the Logos within the One. This mystical bridal procession is a luminous process disguised as a material universe, a timeless process covered over with the fairy tales of ancient mythology and modern science. It is the mystery of the universal mass in which the divine word perpetually descends. Unity alone exists, impossible to split, without spatial or temporal measure, without the slightest fissure. The beautiful procession of worlds without number within the One never ceases to coincide with the flow of the divine will. This creative and continuous emanation is already established in eternity. This mystery, springing up before the illumined eyes of the heart, opens them to the sacred precinct of essence, where all phenomena melt in the sport of the One. It is impossible to imagine with what tender solicitude divine grace protects souls from being dispersed in this bewildering playfulness of reality. This grace alone makes possible the vertiginous transition between essence and divine creation, where the same light mysteriously acts a double role, motionless and movement. There is simply no analogy for such unitive play. All description of this mystery, unity that manifests as dynamic multiplicity without ceasing to be the One, remains the stammering of poetry or the empty disquisition of metaphysics. Reality cannot be reduced to intoxicated words or sober formulas. Reality continues to be only and simply reality. Nevertheless, the ineffable lives fully, with efficacy and power, as each one of the conscious participants in this dream of divine manifestation. In Sufi science, the principle of the mystical participation of each person as the One appears in full light and demands of the Sufi a life of complete originality and attention, alert compassion and humility toward all living beings. Sufi science, diverse as its historical roots may appear, is the consistent response to our demand for universality, a response far beyond any attempts at synthesis or syncretism. The planetary community of Sufism, invisible even to itself, accepts responsibility for the urgent and saving task to discover the unique foundation of all moral principles, all religious doctrines, all philosophical insights. It is necessary to plant this task in the consciousness of the entire earth. Sufism sees the necessity of a vast reaccommodation of peoples, cultures, religions, the necessity of reawakening ancient sacred links with the promised land, not through mere ritual repetitions or external talismans, but through a true combat against the divisive forces of the limited self. This spiritual warfare demands a comportment of courtesy and equanimity from the submitted subjects of the mystical king who are doing battle, using the weapon of perennial wisdom against the distortions of the age. Sufi science is not philosophy, but the passionate attempt to found upon this earth the community that religions hope to encounter on the other side of death. Sufis aspire to open the floodgates of the divine current in their human heart on a world scale. The life of integrating into this friendship without boundaries, into this sacred common work, demands the sensibility that spontaneously submits to the one and thereby unifies with other beings as the infinite family of consciousness. Just the birth within humankind does not grant a person his or her true humanity, which is to see truth face to face. Sufism is an initiatory test, an exodus, a distancing from cultural and personal rigidity. Rites of initiation and their purifying and liberating character stand forth with clarity in the history of all ancient traditions. The modern absence of the mystery of initiation and passage is a modern anomaly. As initiates who truly live, speak, and love, we become one with our environment, with the marvelous reality that surrounds us and constitutes us. Our initiatory act affects the whole human collectivity. Our awakened energy does not pass unperceived in the world of the relations of all living beings. Mystical orders that inherit a continuous initiatory lineage, whose members walk beneath the green banner of a fully realized leader and guide, are a function within the very heart of humanity, a function that always generates new revelatory light. Thus, the emergence of such orders is spontaneous and inevitable, like the pumping action of the physical heart. Spiritual life in community teaches universal compassion, the distinctive note of a contemplative enterprise that does not live to ascend to heaven, but to deepen roots in the sacred earth. Every Sufi initiate recognizes that planetary community is our central responsibility, as we renew our primordial covenant with God to return to our origin, to live within divine unity. The apex of civilization, which is the community of the wise lovers of supreme love, is always situated in an essential present, not existing merely in a remote future or as a vestige of the golden past. Sufism does not symbolize or prefigure, but incarnates the reality with which its science deals. Sufism pronounces the powerful word that puts into movement on this earth the communal task of liberation, a spiritual initiative that inevitably faces the full resistance of the established environment, the resistance of arbitrary conventions and virulent ego. The living word of Sufism always illuminates this decisive moment, the conscious birth of universal humanity. In spite of our being surrounded every day by a world of tangled and neurotic emotions, a world of mirrors and echoes, this revolutionary aspiration can reign in our spirit. The call of Sufism to clarity of action opens our breast with a Gnostic incision, awakening great longing to know ourselves again as a single consciousness diversified into numerous branches. This call stirs enthusiasm to follow with certainty the holy steps of our principal inspirers, the sages, saints, and messengers who possess and demonstrate human authenticity, who never remove themselves from the sacred communal existence of living beings. Sufism forbids only passivity, abolishing by the potent decree of aspiration all that weakens our internal spiritual drive. Sufi science always faces the universal situation which all human beings, all cultures, and all epochs and ages share. Our false sense of alienation from the unique reality, our isolated acts and concepts, must be replaced by total experience. This demands a profession of total faith, a circle without circumference, a consciousness that embraces everything. This is the embrace of essence. This is the faith beyond schisms, professed by Sufism with rigor and without wavering. This all-embracing faith displays an emphasis that is not metaphysical but existential, the development of a truly just and free society governed and guided by the eternal liberty of the soul. It will be a surprising society which forgets its own self-interest to love only God. It will be a society that arises at midnight and with the dawn to pray. It will be a society that seeks out spiritual masters, a society that continues to meditate in spite of privations and tests, that attempts to penetrate the spiritual sense of the universe, that discerns with clarity the causes of the decline and disappearance of previous civilizations. This is not utopian speculation. The Sufi is a being who is extremely sensitive to problems and deceptions of the present time. The Sufi is not a person who maintains aloofness. The Sufi never renounces our origin, which is humanity, or our native land, which is this earth. Sufi science is animated by the pure, inexhaustible longing to unify the entire planet in consciousness of the One. This ethical and Gnostic science is a crucible within which religions, values, and disciplines are heated, mixed, and fused, revealing new facts. This science sharpens the instruments of perception and intellection, refining our sensibilities on all levels. In this state of refinement, the newness always characteristic of divine creation springs up before the eyes of the heart. In a sudden illumination, historical times melt without vanishing into timeless presence. We do not abandon the ancient sages, nor the genuine spiritual guides of all noble traditions, but encounter them directly in the essentiality of the present. This science of glory and delicacy offers a global solution that defies logic, demanding a series of unforeseeable changes and disconcerting turnabouts in the interior of the human being. The characteristic nature of the conventional world and the conventional self is resistance to change. Ecstasy is the efficacious way, the spiritual medicine employed by Sufi masters of all epochs to combat this resistance, this inertia, this ineptitude that, far from giving up, grows in intensity year by year. This warrior science of the transformation of character does not just exist at the margin of history. In the form of revolutionary waves, which are always new, it periodically inundates the arid human mind, tyrannized by its autocratic ego. The components of this tyranny in every society and in every personal career are always the same and always pose problems that are difficult to resolve. Our search for a fundamental solution will be successful if we follow the mystic path to its goal. The intimacy of a union of total love, in which God melts into the human lover. There then exists only the divine I am, replaced by the idolatry of ego. Replacing the idolatry of ego. Sufi science, never anti-traditional, does not counsel humanity to abandon the powerful ancient methods. Prayer and meditation, service to the neighbor, study of scriptures and biographies of saints. What is distinct about this spiritual science, which always develops anew in every historical period, is the wideness of its field of vision and activity. Sufism is never limited to a single sensibility, to a single society, or even to a single religious tradition, but rather embraces the world as a sphere without cultural or personal frontiers. Sufism is capable of inventing new words, but in each epoch its point of departure is exactly the same: to gaze face to face upon reality. Its loom is always the same, the living one. Its call to humanity is always the same: let us begin to exist truly. This primal science, without erasing the specific characteristics of authentic traditions, avoids every form of sectarianism. It breaks the deception of any religion that has become reduced to a caricature of love, to a mere rhetorical or literary exercise, to a petrified cultural image capable of imprisoning our most intimate internal being. The primary procedure appropriate to this science is not analysis or critique. As fetuses in the maternal womb of Sufism, we submerge ourselves in the paradise sensation of praising, breathing, and being astonished. Yet this wonderful prenatal life of the disciple of divine love is not yet mature mystic union. We must advance with more decisiveness, with courageous resolution, ignoring the vestiges of our personal past, ignoring even our own spiritual experiences. We must learn to magnetize all our actions, both voluntary and instinctive, with a longing to come forth from the chrysalis of the limited self, the limited society, the limited family, the limited religion. We must transcend false notions of divine punishment, whether internalized or externalized. We must enter blessed concordance with all humanity, calming our uncomfortable reaction to the tests and purifications that present themselves as human life upon the earth. The spiritual art of living within divine love and divine wisdom is an art that we will never completely master without disappearing into the one and coming forth again as love and wisdom. The germinator of our spiritual seed, the principal agent of our transformation into living testaments, is the Sufi master. He or she is the axis of our evolution, the humble link in the transmission of divine energy, which has flowed into the human heart since the age of Adam, first human being and first prophet, radiant with the unequivocal light of revelation. Throughout the long quest of humanity, this vertical transmission, with all its interdependent branches, has never been interrupted, even though it remains hidden beneath various masks, various nomadic labels. Spiritual life has been expressed across the spectrum of possibility, from armed struggle to monastic renunciation. It is a self-purifying stream. Thus concludes section 1022 of Adam from the Son of Knowledge by Lex Hixon Nur Al Jerrahi. Next we'll pick up again with section 1023, picking up once more in chapter 14, New Light on Sufi Science. I will see you then. Alam.